one of my bigger things to realize or like gross was when I let go of trying to make everything look so pretty in movies, because I came from photography, so I'm like portraits, everything is down to the nth degree perfect. And I think that my movie work got a lot better when I let go of that and let things be like a little bit more imperfect and a little bit more naturalistic.
Welcome to There to Here, an educational podcast where industry professionals talk nuts and bolts and how they got from there to here. On today's show, gaffer Matt Hadley takes us on one of the 15 SAG-AFTRA indie film shoots approved to shoot midst COVID. As this is a new podcast, we're really wanting feedback, so go to media.collabinc.org, fill out the feedback survey, and you'll be entered to win a $25 Amazon gift card. Congratulations to this week's winner, Timothy Snyder. And from Collab Inc., I'm Tanya Musgrave. And today I have Matt Hadley, up-and-coming gaffer, having quite literally lit up the screen with Miss Juneteenth, which premiered this year at Sundance. He's just wrapped up shooting in Texas for the indie thriller Redstone. Also of great interest, it is one of the first SAG-AFTRA approved to shoot post or midst COVID. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So let's start with your There to Hear story. Films would not exist without the crews, so what drew you to your particular role in film as a gaffer?
Before I was really into film, I was a photographer, and I think you remember because like back in these days we were shooting together a lot, and I was really interested in lighting for photography.
Yeah.
Which, you know, when I started getting into film, translated as being like my strongest base skill set was that I knew how lighting worked really well. So people just started asking me to do it when I, you know, in film school for their projects. And, you know, I started doing it professionally and just kind of like fell in love with it. It's one of those jobs that doesn't, I think, get a lot of recognition, but like you still have a lot of creative control on a project if you're working with a DP who's like really collaborative.
Yeah.
So I like it because it allowed me to kind of hyper focus on one aspect of filmmaking, the lighting, and kind of get really good at that thing. So that's kind of just where I've been at for the past few years, is like trying to hyper focus on that.
Yeah. I remember probably my earliest memory shooting with you was in good old North Carolina. I think there was a studio that you had set up, and we were working with strobes really for the first time. We were just kind of figuring stuff out, and hey, like, what about this kind of clamshell lighting? What about this? What about that? And then when I got my first light modifier, it kind of threw light a lot like a beauty dish. And I was like, Matt should be able to tell me how to use this thing. And we got just like, I don't know, how many of us were there? Like a dozen people that just kind of showed up at this abandoned house somewhere in Tennessee.
Oh man, I remember that up on Lookout Mountain.
Yeah. Like I heard that house got torn down, but oh my gosh, it was pretty sketchy when you go in there and there's like syringes and mattresses.
Yeah, I do remember that. That was pretty sketch back in the urban exploration photography days. I remember that. It was a fun time.
But it was a legit shoot. Like it turned out because, I mean, I remember you very clearly. You're teaching me the inverse square law. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that was great. I remember you went in and did post on those photos, like ridiculous, like the water stuff in the kitchen.
As the elements.
Those days when you were cranking out like Photoshop photos. Wow, where did this even come from?
You know what? It all starts with the light, though, and it's really interesting. You know, like you were saying before, that not a lot of people think about it, but it is quite literally. I still remember F-Stoppers doing a shoot, even just with an iPhone, when they did the iPhone fashion shoot, and you know, you can look it up. It's fantastic. They were shooting with an iPhone 3.
Yeah.
and it's of course taken you into film and translated into quite an awesome start. You were shooting in New York a lot. What kind of shoots were you involved with up there?
I've done 2 features in New York. One kind of like I did like a section of that's called Materna that I've heard has turned out really well. It actually got best cinematography at Tribeca this year. And I did another one up there earlier called What Breaks the Ice that was a lot of fun. And I've done a few commercial things here or there. I basically have a DP in New York who likes to work with me. So whenever she has things that are, you know, like appropriate, I'll generally kind of go up to do those.
Is there a particular style that you gravitate to or that you like better, narrative or commercial?
Yeah, I definitely prefer narrative. And I think that is because like commercial just kind of has a style already. Like, I think that there's like a lot of subgenres within commercial lighting, but like by and large, the most popular way to light a commercial is just like big, bright, no shadows. And that's generally because like you're on set lighting in front of a bunch of ad agency people who don't know anything. So there's a lot of like commercial stuff generally ends up catering to this really specific audience, being appeasing agency executives, which, you know, I think that narrative filmmaking becomes a lot more about like self appeasement. Like it is more about you and the director and the DP liking what you see, whereas like your opinion really doesn't matter a whole lot in commercial. I mean, like there are times where like people will trust you and you get to make some really cool looking, and I've made some commercials that like had really cool edgy looks before, but
Kind of like cinematic.
right, like,
Yeah.
and that's definitely a thing that's becoming more popular, but I feel like it's rare. People tend to be really reserved with the way that commercials look because they're afraid of what might happen.
It's familiar.
And movies, you can get really out there. Like if you got a DP who like really wants to get weird with it, you can really like go out there. And that's what I love about movies, is because all of my narrative work, I don't think you could put any two of those films beside each other and draw a ton of comparisons between them, because you really approach it, you know, in a unique way from the get-go every time you get into a movie, you know, like whether that's what your inspiration is or what you draw from. Like one of my favorite movies I did, the DP and the director had given me all of these Vermeer paintings that they were like, this is the feel, like this is
Wow.
the aesthetic and the color palette. And that's really interesting because like what does that even mean, you know? And like you get to kind of like dissect that. And I think that's what's great about lighting for narrative, is that you're always trying to strive for this uniqueness, and you're always wanting to find ways to integrate the lighting into the story. Like, why are these things this color, you know, like why did we make this decision? What is the color palette for this house versus this house? Like, how do we want those two locations to feel? Because that's the other thing I think you miss in commercials is movies. There's kind of like you go through so many different spaces. So it's about lighting spaces in a way that they like juxtapose against each other. Whereas commercials, it's very much like, usually it's like, this is the house, like make this like nice, pretty house.
So I have a question with particularly connecting your experience with photography. Now, as a photographer, it's kind of one of those things you're like, oh yeah, as soon as you see a photo, like I can tell right away that X person, whoever shot that. And you know, that kind of becomes a pinnacle of, you know, some sort of a goal out there, like, oh yeah, I want to become immediately recognizable, you know. And it's something that could serve you well in a way, like if you have directors that want your certain look. But is it something that you're trying to strive for, where you want to become recognizable, or that you're able to fulfill a director's vision so much that like all of your work might be unrecognizable to you? I don't know, like, because I know for photography, it seems to be something that people do strive for. Is that something that you strive for?
The photographers definitely do want that, like, to be the look, right? Like, and
Yeah.
that is because photography has this, there's like a name association with it. Like, you know, a Dave Hill photo when you see it. I don't even know if he still shoots, but I remember that from back in my day.
Yeah.
But I think it's different in my world. I think specifically for me, not really, right? Because like as a gaffer, you need to be able to slot in with like multiple different DPs on a regular basis, because, you know, Grip and Electric, I think they move between movies more than any other department, because they kind of like slot into a lot of different places. You know, I think some DPs strive to have a style, and so I strive to like fit into that person's style or that DP style. But a lot of my favorite DPs to work with, I think, would say that they don't have a style, because
Really?
I think it is the fluidity that is really advantageous, you know, like the ability to conform to a director's vision, or, you know, to conform your own vision in a way that like matches this narrative in like a really good way.
You just know that it's good cinematography, as opposed to, oh, I know that that is Matt Hadley's cinematography, or
Yeah,
that
I
kind of
think
thing.
that taste is like more important. And I've always gone down that line where I'm not great at making direct comparisons to other movies. Like when talking about how to do something, like I've always been more of just like a general kind of aesthetic taste kind of person. Like I kind of feel like I know what looks good on a specific camera, and I kind of like strive for, what I think people expect to see.
Yeah. Is it something that you're eventually wanting to do where you're wanting to be able to collaborate more with directors, or do you like that part where you can just collaborate with the DP? You get to kind of stay out of the politics of stuff, or that kind of thing.
I mean, I like staying a little under the radar on sets. Like that's kind of why I like gaffing instead of trying to be a DP, is that you fly under a lot of the politics of set. I love it when a director like wants to be involved and talk about the lighting process.
Yeah.
But I find it's rare that there are directors who really get in that deep. I do a lot of like indie film production, and so I've worked with a lot of first-time directors, and I find it's very common in a lot of circumstances that the DP is running that side of the ship anyway, and the directors really they kind of hyper focus on the actors. You'll hear them talk shot a lot with the DP, but like it's rare that I've had a director get like down in the nitty gritty of how the film is lit. But like when they do, generally I've like agreed with them and I've enjoyed the process. But I would say it's rare that they get that granular unless there's like a really specific thing that they're looking for, or like a story beat that is a lighting change or motivation.
Yeah.
A lot of the times it's really just kind of like being in it with the DP, which is nice because I think DPs, we always click a lot because we're kind of in that same headspace.
Yeah, and I feel like you would be able to have a little bit more creative problem solving. Well, it could go both ways. Like either, okay, what do you want? Like, do you have any idea of what you want? Or, and coming up with that, or being able to kind of flex that muscle as well and just be able to, hey, like, well, if they're not sure what they want, like, let's see what we can do here. So one of the things that you had mentioned before was being able to be really creative with how things are way out there as opposed to commercial and stuff like that. What does that look like on set? Like obviously there's, I guess, not your 3-point lighting or what have you, but like what are some of the odd ways that you have come up with to light a set?
I think that one of the freedoms that you flex a lot in narrative versus commercial, all of cinematography right now, is like you can make stuff dark. Like you can't really get away with having very dark scenes in commercials.
Yeah.
Rightfully so, because TV rendition is a little bit dodgy, and when you're shooting for projection as your main, kind of format that everyone's thinking about, you can kind of trust your camera to shoot a little bit darker, because like projecting something in a dark room, you'll be able to get the details of it. So I think that's the way a lot of it is, like shooting like darker scenes and being able to shoot things that are darker. Because I really like night stuff. If you can get away with it just like slammed way down into the bottom of the image instead of having like a very contrasty backlight. I like to have a very low contrast but just like super dark, like you can barely see it, because it's the only thing I found that feels realistic to me. I struggle with like the way that nights are shot in movies. Like I don't think it looks very realistic a lot of the time. And that's something you can never really pull off if you're not shooting to like such a controlled environment, because that movie screens are generally going to look the same. I think in general, it's like contrast is a lot higher on a movie set. Like you're getting a lot more like shadows, like lighting people to the backside where you're not necessarily seeing their face so much, is something that like you'd never get away with doing in a commercial. My lighting style, I like to keep it as natural as I can. Not natural as in I'm not using artificial light, because I use a ton of artificial light, but like natural in the sense of like light comes from places that like makes sense or should make sense in the world. Day light comes from windows, like night's light comes from lamps. And I think that you break outside of that in the commercial world to try to keep things looking very bright and airy. But in narrative, you can really like let somebody walk into a dark part of the room because they went over there that's like away from all of the lights, and like it makes sense. And that's something you don't get to flex.
Yeah, sometimes it's just too perfect. It's kind of like, your student film. Everything actually is like 3-point lighting.
I think it definitely was one of my bigger things to realize or like gross was when I let go of trying to make everything look so pretty in movies, because I came from photography, so I'm like portraits, everything is down to the nth degree perfect. And I think that my movie work got a lot better when I let go of that and let things be like a little bit more imperfect and a little bit more naturalistic, because it feels more real to have things that don't necessarily work out what you would call like perfect, or like somebody being lit from not necessarily the most flattering angle, but like that's where the light is in the room.
Gigs in the entertainment industry are few and far between at the moment. It's a bit of a unicorn. How did you score a spot on Redstone's crew?
The DP worked together on Miss Juneteenth. Actually, he was first assistant camera on Miss Juneteenth, or he was second assistant camera on Miss Juneteenth. So we had worked together and we talked a lot over the course of that movie. And he'd actually had another movie midway through last year that he had tried to get me on, and I just wasn't available. So when this came up and they were looking for crew, he reached out to me and Richard Porter, which is my favorite key grip down here in Dallas, to see if we could come do this movie, and everyone was available, so we did. It was mostly just that previous, relationship of he had been trying to get us on a movie together. So when this one came up, he reached out, and because of COVID-19, I was available.
Yes. So, okay, I'm super curious. From beginning to end, what was life like on set?
We weren't tested ahead of time, which I get, because like the infrastructure doesn't even really allow, I think, for testing if you're non-symptomatic, right? Like, I don't think you could go get a test on the street right now unless you said that you were presenting symptoms. There's a really big white paper that's out right now that I think is like it's like SAG and IATSE and the DGA all came together, and they put out this like list of guidelines for shooting during COVID-19. So that was kind of the like first thing, was the producers sent us all of that and told us to read it. And there's like a lot of guidelines, and so once we get into shooting, it's definitely a lot of little things that really add up. I think one of our advantages was that we were shooting out of town, and we were shooting in a very small town that only had like a few cases, and we were all kind of staying together for the most part. So I think that to me is the biggest thing for filmmaking, is if you can quarantine everybody together so that like everybody on the crew is together and there's not a whole lot of outside factors. I think that's your first best bet. But then after that, it was a lot of the stuff you'd kind of imagine, wearing masks on set. There was a heavier emphasis on wearing masks inside than outside, because if you're outside, you can kind of spread out. Hand sanitizer all over the place, frequent kind of temperature checks from day to day, individualized meals and crafty, right? So like no buffet catering, which on this movie took the form of, we would order every day. They would bring us a menu from like a local restaurant, and they were ordering kind of individualized meals. I did a commercial just after the movie where it was a studio and we had catering, and the catering was bringing everything in individualized kind of packaged meals. And then for crafty on the movie, it was like everything was packaged, and there was a guy who was kind of like distributing it, from the station. So you'd go and you tell him what you want, and he would kind of distribute it out. So that was definitely interesting. And
did you guys eat in shifts?
No, we didn't eat in shifts. We generally kind of ate amongst our departments. I ate in my car a lot, and that's like not even a COVID thing. That's just like a Matt needs to get away from everybody in the middle of the workday kind of thing. But there wasn't hard and fast rules about like sitting away. There was enough seating that people could stay kind of spread. But I really think that, I don't know, like making a movie under conditions where you're having to stay away from people like really all the time doesn't seem feasible to me, right? I think that we drew more safety from kind of trusting that the other people didn't have it. And like we did have one of our crew members left halfway through, or like the first week, one of the producers had to fly to LA. So they had to get checked during that process and came up negative. So there was this kind of like, okay, here's a person who's been in our unit for like a week and doesn't have it. So like we don't. So if we can kind of like keep kind of all together, kind of like herd mentality.
Yeah.
But I don't know, it's weird because there's a lot of, I think one of the guidelines is only one AD on set and no PAs, which is kind of wild. Our AD was like, who does lockups like when we cut and roll, like all of these like little functionality things are become like a really big deal when you don't have PAs on set. They do like a lot of little things here and there, So I think that was one area where we were a little lighter on it. And, and I think that, like we had SAG come visit us, like they, and they didn't really say anything. So like, it's interesting to me because there's a lot of guidelines and I'm curious how much they are being followed all over the place, especially by like bigger shows. Cause like, that's the one other thing is like, we were a tiny show, I'm like 20 person crew, maybe if that. So I'm curious, like what the version of this is that was like, the big studio movies that managed to get up and off the ground during the time that we were shooting. Because from what I know, from what I heard was there was like 15, I think, SAG movies shooting at the time that we were shooting who got up. And I wonder how many of those finished because we were an indie, so we only had like a 3-week schedule, but like a major movie that's still shooting, everything's starting to close back down. So I'm curious how many of those got cut halfway through their schedule just by like the fact that states are starting to close down again.
Did it slow down at all? Did your production or your work, did it actually get hindered because of it?
I don't know. I don't think so. We made a pretty good pace, but I think our director helped with that a lot. He like knew what he wanted and like knew when he got it. Like we never beat up 40 takes of a scene, which I think is like important. I think the crew risk is moderate, because we can be in PPE. It's the actor risk that's really high because they have to be without PPE in front of each other. So
of course,
I think our director did a really good job of really limiting the amount of time we ever had actors on set out of PPE in front of the camera acting. We weren't beating up scenes. And I think there was some level of encouragement from SAG about that. I know there was a lot of specifics. I think they had to deliver like a list of how far the actors will be away from each other in every scene.
I was curious about that. Like, I mean, any kissing scenes, that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think like there was a lot of specifics they had to deliver about that. They had the whole thing storyboarded, which is a rare occurrence to see in indie film because like it was a SAG. There's a lot of, I think getting the approval is a really difficult thing because we were kind of like on the maybe train for a while of like, is the movie going to happen? Like they had put dates out to the crew and had people like agreed to do it. But like they were saying, until we can't say for sure until we get this SAG approval. The SAG approval came in, it was like Friday and not like the following Monday, but the Monday after that was the first day of production. So that was definitely a hindrance, was that we had not, and maybe just due to like being in the sense of mind of not doing a whole lot, a lot of people, me and the key rip included, had not put a ton of pre-production work into the movie because we weren't sure it was going to happen. And then it did get approved and we had a week to like 1 week from when we found out to load the truck, which was like going the back and forth with a rental company during that time period is like a really stressful, fast-paced thing because usually you kind of take weeks to kind of like adjust stuff and like we didn't scout locations. Me and the key grip got on the ground and went and visited a couple locations with the DP personally, but there was no like pre-scout for everybody just for the sake of like keeping people from getting together and going out in public as early on.
So were there any protocols that definitely did not work for you guys? It turned out like, this is a mistake, this needs to go away?
I don't know. I think that especially if you're in a hotter climate area like Texas, the idea of wearing a mask the whole time wouldn't really work if you're outside. Like if you're shooting inside in an air conditioned building, like that's okay. But like we had a couple like 103 days in the Texas heat where like if you were carrying around equipment while wearing a mask, you're likely to hurt yourself, I think, in other ways, or it really became tough. Like even going from inside to outside, when you put the mask on, it's definitely a thing.
Shocker.
Like, and I'm 100% for the idea of wearing masks and stuff in public. But I think as far as, I don't know, I really believe that the the secret sauce in filmmaking is creating like a quarantined environment for your crew where you
Kind
can
of like
all
that whole
feel
Tyler
kind of
Perry
safe.
model.
Right. The way that they
Yeah.
approached it, where it's like they're just like straight up locked in there, that feels like the safest option to me, because I think you'd have a hard time with like a whole group of people, you know, and I also think it would just be difficult in a lot of ways. You know, we did as best as we could, you know, a lot of the times in all of our interiors. You wear a mask around these people, but like, say, the grip crew specifically, we were living in a house together. So like, we went home from work, we weren't wearing masks when you're at home off of work. So like at that point, you're still getting this kind of like potential of contamination, right? And you kind of have to trust that like people are going to be responsible on the weekends, because we were close enough to Dallas that everyone was going home for the weekend. I think that one thing that makes me feel good is that, seeing as COVID has become such a political thing, I think that I can trust that most of the people in this industry agree with me about how serious it is. I don't feel like there's many people in our industry who swing far enough to the other side who are being unsafe about it. I trust that anybody I'm working with is probably going to the lengths that I am going to be safe about it when you're kind of like out and about in public.
We've been mentally preparing for like this kind of thing, for like wearing PPE, getting temperature taken. I think even like on college campuses, like there are temperatures being taken before you even get on campus. Were there any surprising effects of the regulations, like effects you weren't necessarily expecting, like good or bad?
Yeah, not necessarily. You know, like I think going into it, it was pretty much as we had kind of thought and talked about ahead of time, mostly because we were following this kind of like specific list of guidelines that we'd all kind of gone over before we got into it. I think the food thing was definitely one of the weirder ones. It's like, and this is like weird and petty, but it's like sometimes you're like more hungry on set, and you're kind of like locked into this size of meal, which is kind of like, it seems really petty, but if you work in film, you understand how like being properly fed is such a big deal. That's like why craft services exist. So that was definitely kind of interesting going into, especially the way we did it, where it was like trying to be on top of being like making orders every day, you know, for the next day, and the producer having to go around and do it. I can imagine that that took an enormous amount of bandwidth from the producing team, which was very small, to have to even manage that, right? Like you've got to go and you've got to have somebody pick up all this stuff on a movie that had 2 PAs on the entire set, right?
Wow.
Like I bet production suffered a lot for it. And I think that G&E, we had kind of like the general safety guidelines to follow, but a lot of our stuff was business as usual. But I can imagine that on the like production department, there must have been hundreds of things that I never even had to really interface with, that had to be done differently or approached differently. So I think that's definitely the place that I think are going to feel it the worst, which is maybe the nature of film in general, is that they have to like produce things, and in this case they have to produce this like safe environment for us to work in. So I think that they're going to get the brunt of the issues from the changes, and the G&E department, it's mostly going to be the difficulty of working in PPE, and then also just kind of like maybe tending to work with less people physically on set at any given time, especially when you're in interiors. You know, like we had a lot more of our guys at the truck. You know, we could have smaller groups of people kind of like managing what was going on inside.
So for how, you're basically mentioning all of the changes on the horizon that people have been dreading in a way, even just for production. I remember talking with a line producer. He was saying, yeah, the number that's kind of floating around is every production is adding like 10% onto the budget. And, like people don't like hearing that, that's one thing. But, for your particular job, having to adjust to having lesser crew and stuff like that, what are the changes on the horizon that you're seeing personally that you're going to have to adjust to? For instance, like, are there other jobs that you're going to have to learn how to do in order to wear more hats? But, because I also saw a rebuttal from that white paper, talking about how the answer is to not combine job descriptions, because then safety becomes a factor. You don't want a bunch of people wearing a bunch of different hats when,
Yes.
that kind of thing.
I super agree with that, because I think
Really?
a lot of people, I think some producers, like I think what's going to be bad for us is that producers are going to try to do stuff like that to circumvent the amount of money they're spending. Things like, we've got a PA who can help you but like I don't want a PA anywhere near touching any of our stuff. Like it's like you said, safety is like a serious concern, and especially depending on the department, trying to get people to cross train or do other departments' work brings a significant immediate safety risk. And I think that's really true with grip and electric. You know, like we're hanging stuff, we're running power that's strong enough to kill people. Like I don't want help from other departments so that the production can save money by not letting me hire professionals who actually do this job.
So, okay, I'm going to put you in the position of a producer then. How would you rectify the situation?
It sucks because, man, the first thing that comes to my head is, I don't know, that's not my problem. And that's a very like G&E, DP.
But does it become your problem if you
like,
can't get hired? Is that a problem? You know, like that becomes your problem if, producers, they have to figure out a budget.
I think that budgets will just have to adapt. I think that there are shows where like that amount of money is going to kill the project. But I think by and large, most shows can deal with a 10% increase to budget. You know, like if somebody's investing $200,000, which is nothing. If somebody's investing $1 million in a movie, like they can probably invest $1.1 million in that movie to make it happen, right? And I think in commercial, there's just like no excuse. Like in the commercial world, like ad agencies blow so much money on stuff on commercials. Like you guys can definitely afford to have a safe environment. I think we'll see a rise in studio work because that was definitely something that I found was going into an all stage commercial production right after the movie was that it's a lot easier, it seems like, to kind of have this contained environment in a stage. I've been looking at a lot of stagecraft type stuff, right? Like the people who did The Mandalorian and the way that was shot. It is perfectly poised to be the next like biggest shit in filmmaking because it already was, it was a cool tech and Favreau showed on The Mandalorian that it was viable. You know, they said they were going to like try it when they first went into it, and like I think over half of the show uses it in some facet. So that'll be interesting because that's one of those things that's like looking at that scares me because that's actually something that I could see taking my job.
Is that something that you would be willing to, I mean, because you think about the lighting that's involved with that as well. I mean, there's still going to be a need for lighting. So how would you adapt your job to fit that kind of...
For me, looking at it a lot, right, like a lot of it is very different because it's this blending of game design and film production. It's like a lot of your lighting comes from the skybox. Digital environments are lit via a file called an HDRI, which is basically a 360-degree photograph of an area, and you basically get this, colored skybox that provides most of the light for stuff like that. But then they'll show in some of the demos, like if they want to like increase light from this side or like adjust it a little bit, the guy goes in on his computer and they'll just draw a big white 8x8 square on the wall, and there's your 8x8 butterfly frame. Like for me, I think the next evolution is to be that guy who's like controlling that thing, which is it's a different mindset, but you definitely still have to understand how lighting works. Like they're still going to need people to tell them how to use those tools effectively or to be the person who can do both. A lot of my recent years I've spent getting really good at DMX controlling lights on set. That has been like my kind of niche for a while, is like my ability to on the fly control all of the lights on a set. It's popular everywhere right now because it's becoming more of an available thing in film. And I think that kind of leads into it. It's like the ability to program lights in an environment to like work together with this LED screen technology that they're using now to like present backdrops and stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, old school can still be a boss. I mean, you look at Roger Deakins and what he can accomplish, and like because he has a foundation of knowing how light works. I mean, you still need to know that. I mean, I see plenty of badly lit renders, and you're just like, that's not real. Like you can tell this is completely not a good render.
Yeah. No. I mean, and that's the thing, right? Is like that the big barrier to this is having camera ready assets, right? one of the things that The Mandalorian had that really helped that be a successful thing for them is a lot of the backdrops in The Mandalorian are very simple. You know, there's a lot of like practical bar interiors and stuff like that, but a lot of that show is him on like a desert planet or stuff like that. So like I think as you try to do things that are more complex and complicated backdrops, there will become a wall where like you need artists who can create photorealistic assets that are camera ready for this technology.
Ooh,
And
yeah,
like The
interesting.
Mandalorian was backed by ILM, so they had the greatest visual artists in the world to make all of their assets. But not every movie I think is going to be able to find, you know, digital artists who can make these things, or like to be able to get really high resolution photo scans is the way a lot of people do it.
So kind of having your Adobe stock.
Right. Like there will have to be a library, and I bet you'll start to see a lot of things show up multiple times
Like,
because
hey, I recognize that
companies
rock
will
pile.
have this kind of collection of assets, you know.
Yeah.
But I think in like a post-COVID world, people will always want to do the traditional thing. A lot of people will, but I think we're going to come out with this being a major thing in film, because what it does is really awesome. Like the being able to tie the specularity of the lighting to your visual effects is something that people spend so much time trying to do on set, and that setup really kind of trivializes the whole process. Like there's a lot of like, it becomes a pre-production game. Like, can you build the world to shoot in, and then actually like going in there and shooting it is like easy as shooting in the real world. But it does, it becomes this, which I think a lot of this COVID stuff gets really pre-production heavily weighted, is you really got to spend more time planning these things, which is like good, because everybody could stand to spend more time planning movies as it is.
This is true.
Like everybody's always in such a rush to shoot their movie, and if this makes people slow down a little bit and like miss less details, then
Yeah.
that's kind of a good thing. Like
Yeah,
you
of
kind of need
course.
that.
Did you guys have shorter shooting days?
No, pretty standard 12s plus, you know, if we went into
Interesting.
OT. The commercial I did 10s, and we went over on those quite a few days. So that's interesting, because I don't also really see how much more unsafe it is to be in a room with the same people for an extra
4
4
hours.
hours or something.
Yeah.
You know, like
Interesting.
that I think is one of the
Exhaustion,
things
maybe.
that,
Immune system.
yeah, I guess, right? Like you can say that like you're putting your immune system at risk, but I mean, yeah, that's just filmmaking is always going to be like that. They're always going to like grind the crew into the ground. Like that's a conversation that's been going on for years. Is like whether we should be allowed to like have lives and work in the entertainment industry.
There's a really interesting article called like we don't want things to go back to normal. Normal wasn't working.
Yeah, yeah, I
basically.
think
And
I've seen that.
I think it was written by an editor. And so we're gonna see if we can try to get him on there. I'd
So
like
hard sitting in your room cutting for too long. I get that mentality, and because I think it's like we definitely push it a lot, especially with things like people driving back from set really late at night and being sleep deprived. I'm kind of a glutton for punishment when it comes to filmmaking, though. So
I think
like,
anybody who's in this industry originally, like they kind of want that. It's kind of a
Yeah.
badge of honor.
yeah, it kind of like I didn't mind not having. Like I don't mind not having a whole lot of time to sit and think about my life. It's nice that like projects are so like they just take over everything in my life that I don't really got to worry about anything else. But like that might just be me. It definitely is a thing. I think like in general we should take a hard look at like what we are requiring of people to work in this industry, and being more moderate about the time that we're making people work. But also it's, if you work in it, you can see why like leaving at the end of the day instead of spending 2 hours to pick up the last pieces of this scene, like you're talking about a massive increase in cost to add days to a show. Like the day rate of every person on the show paying to rent everything for another day. Like the amount of money that adding time to movies increases the budget is like astronomical, which makes it really hard in the indie world, which is mostly what I do, is the kind of like smaller non-union
It's true.
indie productions. I think in the big show world, yes, like they should just, because they can afford on studio projects to come back and do it later. You know, they just, you know, want to get it out of the way while they can.
Are you wanting to pursue the union?
Yeah, I do want to move up to bigger shows. There's definitely like bigger stuff that shoots in Texas. A lot of the stuff around here that's bigger is episodic, which is a little daunting to me. I don't know how I feel about working for 6 months straight, which like probably sounds weird to like an accountant who's like, I've worked for 12 years straight. But like the idea of going to work like the same job every day for like six to 9 months seems really intense. And I really like the like do a commercial here, do a movie here.
You're
maybe
an
like
artist.
a month and a half
That's
at a time,
why.
right? Yeah. But I would like to do bigger stuff. But that's kind of a weird, I'm trying to thread that needle. Like a lot of people will come up through the union and the industry by working for other people in that position, right? And I am a little bit maybe prideful. I've been gaffing for a long time, just like gaffing my way up smaller productions. So the idea of going on the next Marvel movie to pull cable is like not appealing to me at all.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's a step back. I don't care how big the movie is. Like if
Yeah.
I'm not a department head anymore, it's a step back for me. So it's hard. I'm trying to figure out how to like thread that needle of like getting on a bigger show without having been on a bigger show yet, which is kind of tricky. And I think I might have found it recently is this commercial I just did. I actually just ran the DMX board for a gaffer who's like a friend of mine. And I actually think that might be the ticket in, because it's kind of like there's still a level of creativity where like you've got your hands on it and like you can be like, what about this? And like, what about that? And you're working like very closely with the DP and the gaffer. And also I'm not like having to like pull banded cable in the mud and the rain and stuff, you know. But that's definitely my next kind of big thing, is like trying to get onto a bigger union. I've got my days. I need to just join IATSE down here, but I just haven't done it.
So we have some listener questions from our Insta and Facebook stories and Twitter. If you want to ask your questions to future guests, our handle on Insta and Twitter is Collab Inc. Podcast. So, all right. Gaffers and grips are known for outrageous rigging to make things work, taping a shirt to a window to cut reflection, all that fun stuff. There is an Instagram, pardon the French, yRigs. What would be your proudest submission to that account?
I think in general, you know, when it comes to like specific rigging, a lot that pretty much falls on the grips, you know, like if I need a light in a weird place, I don't want to, nah, it's not my grips. Go hang that and make it safe. Cause like, I don't want it to be my responsibility if it falls. But I will say, like, especially on the smaller end as a gaffer, there must be at least one scene in every movie where I am hiding behind something or crouched on the ground holding a light in this like really weird spot, you know, like lately with like my having gained the ability to control lights on set, this is less common, but it used to always be hiding somewhere with a dimmer box or like a switch. Like if somebody goes into a room and turns on a light, I'm like crouched underneath the bed with the switch so that when they go to click the light, I can hit the switch to turn all of the lights on in the room, you know? I think that that's something that is like a super common little janky thing that you do. And then I think some of the cooler rigging kind of like trick stuff is lately, you know, Titan tubes are all the rage these days. You know, they're these battery powered RGB tubes that, you know, are 16 pixels across the length of them. So you can do a lot of cool animations with them. And we've done some really awesome process trailer work lately where we're, you know, running a car on the process trailer and then running a bar of Titans down the passenger side of the car high and one down the driver's side of the car low. And then you match your light color to the color of the street lights on the street you're driving. And then we'll chase light down the tubes. So like as you're shooting into the car, you get the street lights as the car is passing, which like a lot of the times you don't get the output you want out of existing street lights. And people did poor man's process for forever, where they just kind of like, you'd put a light on like a T-pole and spin it around over the car if you were like in a studio. But bringing some of those techniques to a trailer using these kind of modern LED technologies that we have is this great blending of both worlds. We can have kind of really specific lighting, but still have like the realistic environment of them like driving around in the background. And we've done all kinds of stuff where it's like street lights going. We'll have on the passenger side, like it's white light to halfway down the car and then it turns to red light. So you can have a button to make it look like a car passes them on the opposite side if you want to like kick some light in to the driver, you know, for whatever reason. And we've used it for like crash scenes where like somebody swerves to avoid another car. Instead of actually having another car, we do the entire thing with a programmed light chase. That's some of the more fun stuff I've gotten to do lately. I think that like is an interesting new way of kind of blending two older techniques, process and poor man's process, together to make something that I think like looks better than either one of them ever did on their own.
I had no idea about even just like the T-pole thing. That's pretty.
Oh
that's
yeah,
pretty sweet.
there's like I think my second feature we did one of those, but it's like a whole. I mean, because you've got the T thing swinging with like the bastard amber on it, and that's the street lights. And then you'd put two 650s pointing like away from the car, and then have two guys with silver reflectors.
Yeah.
And you read the back 650, and they're the cars, and they go like this, and they would get in time, and one would sweep it down the side, and then the guy in the back would pick it up with the red and carry it out. Old poor man's process was crazy because I mean you've got like 9 grips and electrics sitting there doing weird things to make the light move around on the car, and then there's always the guy at the back who's got the stick underneath the bumper and he's doing this number to make the car move. I mean that was
Got a
definitely, it was
sandwich.
fun back in the day shooting, but it also always looked about as cheesy as it felt while you were doing it.
Last listener question. When was a time that you felt defeated on set, like your project was falling apart, and how did you fix it?
I think I've had times where I felt defeated, and I don't think I've ever had it where I felt like the film was falling apart. I think if you get the feeling that the film is falling apart, it usually ends up not feeling like it's your fault. Like there's a lot of like especially with grips and electric, like go back to the truck and talk about how awful everything is going because the producers suck. But I've definitely had problems with connecting with DPs that becomes very frustrating, where like you can't get on the same wavelength with a DP. And that is really, and I don't even know what the answer, because that one, the last movie I had where that was the case, it really just spiraled out of control until it ended with me and the guy totally not being able to stand each other at the end of the movie. And I got kicked off of set, which I never thought was going to happen.
Oh my gosh.
So like I've definitely had those moments of like going out and like, feeling like you're just not being able to achieve what you think, but you kind of just got to bite your lip and bear it, man, because film sets, there's not really time to sit around and think about your decisions. Although I'll say I do spend a fair amount of time thinking about my life decisions while I'm on a film set, but like it really becomes one of those things where like, I think it's a key thing in filmmaking to be able to bear it. Like when things are not going great, you have to bear it because there's no leaving. There's no, like, nothing's going to stop. You have to finish today's work and you have to do your best because like you're currently on your job interview for your next job. But it definitely is one of those things where there's not a whole lot of room for feeling sorry for yourself, which is something that I love to do. So it's difficult for me at times. But a lot of the times I'll just excuse myself, go outside, take like a breather and then go back in there and just like jump back in and get back at it. Cause like everybody's there and everybody's got to do their part or else it's not going to happen.
Well, thank you so much for taking time at especially after like very, very quick recovery after your last shoot. But yeah, seriously, thank you so much. If you enjoyed this interview, follow us right here and check out more episodes at media.collabinc.org. If you have comments or know someone who would be a great guest on our show, send in your suggestions to Tanya at collabinc.org. Matt, thanks so much again for your time. Be well and God bless. We'll see you next time on There to Hear.